Here, our first commenter will be Chris Schutz. Good morning, Mr. Schutz.
Good morning. I'm Chris Schutz, the new Executive Director of the California Sport Fishing Protection Alliance. I'm here today with some colleagues to remember Bill Jennings, CSPA's Executive Director and leader since 2005, who died on December 27th, 2022. Over the past 3 decades, Bill appeared hundreds of times before the State Water Board and regional water quality control boards. He advocated before those boards regarding water quality and water rights, drought management, and all manner of additional issues. One of his first appearances before the state board was in the early 90s regarding Penn Mine, in which he eventually prevailed over a young Tom Howard and leveraged the cleanup of the mine and large flow increases in the lower McCollum River. Bill's last appearance before the state board was in April 2021 regarding drought variances. Today, we have several people to remember Bill and what he meant to them, California's fish and aquatic ecosystems, and to the Bay Delta estuary and the people who live in and near it. Those people are Gary Bobker, who has only a few minutes, and I'd like to have go first, Sejal Chokshi Chu, Mike Jackson, Barbara Berrigan-Perea, John Herrick. Then I'd like to make a few closing remarks. I'll let each person introduce himself or herself in turn.
Thank you, Mr. Schutz, and appreciate everyone gathering to commemorate and here honor Mr. Jennings. Mr. Bobker.
Great, thank you, Chair. And thanks for the introduction, Chris. Gary Bobker with the Bay Institute. You know, for me, it's very fitting to note Bill's passing before the board because Bill, I think more than any other individual, kind of personified the Delta. His knowledge of the Delta's history and ecology was encyclopedic. His commitment to protecting the health and the future of the Delta was total and tireless. His engagement on just about every aspect of the Delta's health and future was comprehensive. You know, Bill was involved from the very local to the largest landscape level, you know, in all kinds of state, federal, local venues. He crossed issue boundaries from fisheries and water quality to environmental justice. And I think in particular, you know, his vision of the Delta included both its incredible natural treasures and the people who lived in it. You know, he was a lifelong civil rights activist, and I think he pioneered the marriage of environmental and environmental justice issues in a way that has inspired a lot of people. You know, indeed, his very appearance kind of personified the Delta. I mean, the Delta is a kind of unique, go at your own way place. And, you know, Bill had his own rather unique, quirky appearance and manner. You know, I think it's also important to note that Bill could be extremely hard-hitting in his criticism of anyone who he felt was harming the Delta's interests. But he always conveyed that criticism in a way that was gentlemanly, thoughtful, courteous, and you know, as a result, I think he got along with a lot of people and got a lot accomplished because he was able to not personalize these issues. You know, to quote a cliche, he leaves a big hole that I think no single person is going to fill, but I think he's also going to be an ongoing inspiration for a whole generation of Delta activists that he helped create. So let me leave you with this final thought. I think, you know, Bill had a special concern for regulators who didn't do their job regulating, the whole issue of regulatory capture. So as members of the State Water Board, I counsel you that if you waver in your duty to regulate and protect the Delta, that there's probably going to be a puff of pipe smoke that comes your way just to remind you and stiffen your resolve. So with that, it's we'll all miss Bill, and but be inspired by his example. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bobker.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Sejal Choksi Chu, and I'm the Executive Director of San Francisco Baykeeper. Thank you so much for making time today for this tribute to Bill Jennings. Bill was a longtime friend and mentor, and it's my honor to be saying a few words in his memory today. When I graduated law school in 2002 and joined the team of Baykeeper, my main job for 2 years was to work for Bill on our Delta Keeper project to reduce pesticide pollution in the Central Valley. And I still remember that day when I met my first boss. I walked into his home office and was immediately overwhelmed with the sight of papers and open books everywhere, the aroma of pipe tobacco, and a big, big hearty laugh. He was talking to someone in a soft Southern drawl, and it actually took me a second to understand what he was saying because of all the acronyms he was using. He looked at me skeptically as if he were going to interview me for the job that I had already started. But after a nice long chat during which we learned we were both Southern transplants that had deep-rooted passions for clean water, he thoughtfully puffed on his pipe, and a twinkle came to his eye as he said, mostly to himself, "Well, I think we're going to work together just fine." I soon learned that when his number popped up on my caller ID, it meant he had a big new idea to protect the estuary and tough questions that required long hours of intense legal research on my part. And I realized that for Bill, meaning by extension for me, work was life, and there was really no need to balance anything more than that. Bill lived and breathed the Delta, so much so that even when Baykeeper had to consolidate our Delta work into one office and downsize, our board let him continue using the Delta Keeper email address because that identity was so personal for Bill. He inspired me to turn what I love into my life's work. And that's why, even though he lived a life doing what he loved, his passing reminds me of all the irreplaceable things that we're losing. Bill always spoke truth to power, and so I'd like to speak up for him now. Our fish and water quality are declining, and as he would tell us, the only way to restore them is to reduce harmful water diversions so that our estuary can thrive. In memory of Bill and all that he worked for, the most fitting tribute we could pay him would be for the board to quickly develop and implement long overdue water quality standards before we lose species like the Delta smelt and salmon that Bill devoted his life to protecting. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Good morning, Chair and board members. Barbara Barragan-Priya with Restore the Delta. Today, we remember Bill Jennings, who was a mentor and a friend to me and the senior team at Restore the Delta. Bill was 20 years my senior and was truly an older brother. He was caring and bossy, hilarious and impatient, but he always did it with heart all at the same time. He frequently checked in to make sure I was doing okay during my long days of organizing throughout California. We always worked on opposite schedules. Bill was a night owl and I'm a morning riser. So we joked that we were like Britain in America, with one of us always up protecting the greater good of the Delta. He was a true friend. Bill served on the hiring committee to form Restore the Delta. And after I began to build our organization, my preschool daughter wanted to join every water meeting because she really knew that Bill was Santa Claus. It didn't help that Bill confirmed her belief by always winking at her in silence, just like Santa winks at children in the movies. By the time she was a first grader, she had a doll named after Bill, who in her world of play was busy with water quality meetings and preparing for court. He captured her imagination. A few years later, they became buddies when he lent her pipes from his collection to use in a summer theater program. And He even kept an eye on her one long afternoon for me with complete glee as she rolled down a grassy hill for hours, ruining a party dress at a Restore the Delta event at the Grand Island Mansion while I was preoccupied with other guests. Bill had the best laugh the next day, telling me what a marvelous time she had rolling for hours in the grass and dirt, ruining her clothes. I wanted to share these personal memories about Bill because we all know about the brilliance of his work, his advocacy, and his abilities as a deep thinker. But what a lot of people don't recognize is that behind this brilliance was a man with a full heart and the best of old school American values. Insisting on a world where fish and frogs thrived was essential to Bill because it meant that kids like my daughter would grow up in a world healthy enough to roll around green hills and enjoy getting into outdoor mischief rather than playing endless video games. Bill was also a friend and mentor to Tim Stroshane and Brian Smith, our other senior staff members, as well as to countless other environmental advocates throughout California. Losing him feels heavy for all of us. Our board members at Restore the Delta, a most diverse group politically, all respected and cared for Bill. As our organization's interests and team evolved in its advocacy for the Delta, Bill would simply say to me, "Keep at it, good for you." During an extended visit I had with Bill on Boxing Day 2021, we were both recovering from serious illnesses. I was lucky enough to have hours of a fascinating conversation with him about how our nation's culture changed during his lifetime. A most memorable day I will carry with me forever. To understand Bill's work, what fisheries, rivers, and the Delta meant to him, I'd like to share this video with you. It's short, 2.5 minutes, and it's from our 2012 documentary. And all of it still rings true for today.
Bill Jennings, Executive Director of the California Sport Fishing Protection Alliance, has spent many years fighting for decent water quality for fish and habitat, which is also decent water for people and farming.
You look at this estuary, and it, on the surface, it looks fine. You've got water. You don't see pollution. This really is one of the great natural estuaries in the world. It's certainly the largest estuary on the west coast of the West Hemisphere. It's certainly the crossroads of salmonid migration up to the great rivers of the Central Valley. And we're not talking about a Delta smellet or a salmon. I mean, we're talking about the hemorrhaging of a biological tapestry of an entire ecosystem, multiple species. The issue is whether we can continue to grow subsidized crops in the desert, and whether we're going to grow cotton and almonds for export, and at the expense of this marvelous estuary, and then the expense of Delta farming, the 500,000 acres of Delta farmers who are fighting the intrusion of salt. And we all recognize that we're going to survive together, or we're going to perish together. I mean, our fates are intertwined, and we can't ignore that. And that's why, in the efforts to protect this estuary, there's been the oddest coalition of farmers and environmentalists and fishermen and small businessmen and industrial tycoons. I mean, coming together to fight for this estuary because it's worth fighting for. It's a special place. It's a place called home. I mean, it is our home.
Fighting for fisheries, waterways, and wild places was Bill's way of protecting our community, the Delta, our home. I hope that we all can carry the legacy of Bill's work forward for the health of California, water future for our state. There's no better way to honor his memory for the people who worked with him or for this board. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Berrigan-Perea.
Hello, this is John Herrick, South Delta Water Agency. Thank you, Mr. Chair and board members, for allowing us to give these little few words about our fellow friend, Bill Jennings. What can you say about Bill? Well, of course, he was an incredible environmental advocate, and as Barbara mentioned, he either was or pretended to be Santa Claus on various occasions. I'd just like to note, and I hope Bill can hear this, that now that I've grown older and expanded, I come to appreciate the benefits and sheer genius of suspenders, making my life much easier. I knew Bill was a good guy when he first met my wife, and in the same sentence, he complimented her and insulted me. And so I knew he was a man after my own heart. Bill was a true believer, calmly and diligently fighting for what he thought was right. He was never afraid to confront power, but he was never mean. He was never insulting. He was always polite when doing it. Bill was that very rare person nowadays who could discuss politics with people with the opposing view without thinking them evil or disassociating themselves. He and I found much common ground on various issues, even though we seldom, if ever, voted for the same person. And we did vote for the same person once in a while. When Bill spoke, everybody listened. His familiarity with the facts was remarkable. His knowledge was incredible. His presentations were very cogent and effective. And I recall many in opposing counsel declining to cross-examine him so they wouldn't ruin their own case by mistake. My Delta farmers regularly responded with concerns that once some new program was going to get started, that Bill Jennings would start suing them. And I'd tell him that. And he'd kind of look a little hurt and say, I've never gone after a Delta farmer. And we'd laugh a little bit. And Bill wasn't out to get people. Bill was out to preserve the Delta. And he did a remarkable job in doing that. At this time, I'd like to give a shout out to Mr. Tom Keeling and his wife, close friends of his here in Stockton. And Bill used to spend about every Friday night for at least a decade at their house. And we all appreciate their companionship with him. And they gave him good food, good time, good conversation. And there may have been a little wine or stiffer spirits involved in those rendezvous. As part of a fraternal organization, I've given about 40 funerals over the past 20 years. And this either does or doesn't give me some little perspective on life and death because of the numerous times I've been involved with the families of somebody who's passed. So what does it all mean? We don't know. The ultimate questions remain unanswered. But if I may, I'd like to give a brief quote from one of the funeral services I give. And that is, when we near our final days, all of the pomp and pleasure of this fleeting world palls upon the senses, and the recollection of a virtuous and well-spent life yields the only comfort and consolation. Bill, our recollection of you is of one who has led a virtuous and well-spent life, and it gives us some little comfort now that you've left us. Bill was a true friend, and we will miss him, and I appreciate the opportunity to give these words. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Eric. And we have Mr. Jackson's been invited to speak again, and we have extended him an opportunity to unmute as well. Jackson, it looks like you're unmuted, so if you'd like to try to speak, you can. You don't need to turn on your camera unless you'd like to.
Thank you very much. I met Bill Jennings in a pipe shop in Stockton in 1985 when CSPA was looking for someone who in the Delta who had the appropriate views on this importance of the Delta and the need to save it. It was the luckiest day of my life, other than meeting the woman who just tried to fix all of this mess that I created with my Zoom. The three things that Bill Jennings lived for were the Delta, the people of the Delta, and the University of Kentucky basketball team. About a year and a half ago, he was involved in an automobile accident. And I really expected that he would be back right away. It turned out that he lost interest even in the University of Kentucky basketball team. So I think what he would like me to say is that in that 35 years, we did some good. We also failed on numerous occasions on very big issues. But Bill was one who believed that if you were actually going to get to the bottom of things, actually save things in California's aquatic ecosystems, you were going to have to be brave enough to take on the biggest people in their most important area. And he did that his whole life. When Bill was a young man, he developed an interest in riding on buses in the South. He was usually the only Caucasian person there, and he could be recognized easily by the bright red hair, the pipe, and the smile. He never got to write the book that he had intended to write, which was had a working title of Mississippi Jails I Have Known. But he did understand that things had to change, that things would change if you would continually push. And he brought that civil rights experience into the environmental rights that have been carried on so well by Barbara Berrigan-Perea and others. The hope is that in the future, this board will exercise its full authority to save the rivers of California. Bill is known and worked with board members since the 1980s. They've all been well-meaning. They've all understood by the end of their term that things had to change. But the political route that changes fairly regularly in a long-term project like saving the Delta has people restarting and trying to recreate what you already know. So his message to this board would be, please use your heart as well as your brains to actually begin to solve the problem. And it can't be done by pleasing everyone, CSPA included, Bill included. But please start. We're reaching the point where everything is beginning to fail at once on all of the rivers leading into the Delta. So while he very much liked and admired State Water Board staff, the political part has got to be fixed in order that we can then begin to use your staff to fix the problems. So we love Bill, we honor Bill, and we hope that there are replacements for Bill in the future. Thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you, Mr. Jackson. Really appreciate your participation and words and acknowledgement here.
Thank you, sir.
And I think at this point, Mr. Schutz had indicated he wanted to say a few words to close us out.
I do, and thank you very much. One of the great lessons that Bill Jennings learned from his years in the civil rights movement is that you can motivate some people by confronting them with actions that don't match up with values. Another thing Bill learned is that indulgence has its limits. Often as not, you need a lawyer. In an interview with Alex Breitler of the Stockton Record in 2012, Bill said, "I value the law deeply. If you don't agree with the law, you work to change it. That's why I believe in regulation and why I have no sympathy for state agencies that can't bring themselves to enforce the law. If we don't have that, society disintegrates." It's fair to say that no organization has been more consistent in defending the State Water Board's authority than CSPA. It's probably also fair to say that no organization has been more consistently critical of the board's exercise of that authority than CSPA. That's part of the legacy of Bill Jennings, and it's likely to continue. But it would be a great disservice to consider Bill a contrarian who lived to fight. Bill was incredibly thorough. He demanded rigor from those he worked with. This was because he understood the value and importance of evidence. But for Bill, the value of process was as a clear path to outcomes. He showed there is great dignity in fighting for his beloved Delta and everything that depends on it. But he fought out of reverence for the Delta and the natural world and to make them better, not for the sake of fighting. Bill had no time for purists who substitute grand visions for hard work and aspirations for solutions, any more than Bill had time for those agencies and organizations that will settle for 2 fish when there's a need for 100. Bill understood that how you do business is often as important as the business you do. Serious people take serious people seriously. Fights over our collective natural heritage are bigger than the people who fight them. Personalizing those fights trivializes the fights and the resources at stake. Bill respected some of his adversaries more than some of his erstwhile allies. Many of Bill's adversaries respected Bill. Following Bill's death, one of Bill's longtime adversaries wrote to me. He took a small organization and built it into a powerhouse environmental protection advocate. In my view, his perspective was necessary, important, and productive. Many people recognize Bill's moral gravitas, but those of us who knew Bill well remember his overarching generous spirit. He basically devoted and donated the last 35 years of his life to California's fish. He asked for very little in return. He was self-taught. He learned regulatory process by doing it. He understood it as hard. He didn't understand why more people don't persevere in mastering what is hard, because what at stake is so foundational. CSPA will continue the initiatives Bill guided for the past 2 decades. We'll be looking for a couple of people to continue Bill's work, but none of them will ever replace Bill Jennings. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you today and remember our friend and colleague.
Thank you, Mr. Schutz. I really appreciate you organizing this and for the speakers who have spoken today to honor the memory and work of Bill Jennings. I am always incredibly humbled to serve on this board and be in this position at this time, because I know that there's an incredible legacy of not just Bill, but many folks that have spent their lives working on the challenges that are before this board. And so I just incredibly am appreciative of being able to acknowledge his work and here all collectively continue to commit to figuring out how we best balance what are, I know, compounding challenges here, both in the Delta and throughout the state. So just really appreciate you taking the time and doing this morning. Vice Chair, is there anything you wanted to say? Or Ms. Okay.
Oh, I just wanted to add, Bill Jennings was one of the first people I met when I started working in the San Joaquin Valley. He was the one that introduced us to the Central Valley Regional Water Quality Control Board, really mentored us around advocacy with the board, and we worked together on the irrigated lands program. You know, I think everything that folks said really resonates with my experience. There was incredible respect from him for community representatives, participation in the decision-making processes that affect them, and really that value and fundamental belief, frankly, in the regulatory agencies and the missions that they have, and the importance of participating directly. He never tried to use community members for other campaigns in which they, weren't involved. There was really an incredible respect for just listening to their voices and making sure that there was really space for people to talk about their lived experience. Just incredible respect and also affection for who we all referred to as Santa Claus, and remember well. I love the glasses on the forehead. It was just just hugely just huge affection and gratitude for kind of the mentorship in regulatory advocacy from the beginning of my career. So thank you.
Board member, Vice Chair.
I just want to thank you all that participated today in taking your time to choose this, the Water Board, as a forum to honor Bill. Just really appreciate everything that was said, and the video especially, actually giving us a chance to see Bill once again and be reminded of just so many unique things about him. I especially appreciated that when he did appear before us, the room was pretty quiet. Everyone stopped and wanted to hear what Bill had to say, and appreciate also how he said it. And I think that many people spoke about this, how thoughtful, how articulate, but how respectful of different views, but made his views very clear, but didn't do so, in an aggressive way, which I actually think helped to better deliver the message. So thank you all again for appearing before us.
Thank you, Vice Chair. And again, thanks to everyone that spoke. I don't know if Mr. McGuire, Board Member McGuire, thank you.